Good morning, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Roundtable Talk Show. I am your host, Sharifa Hardy, and I have a very special show for you today. I know I say every day is a very special day, but today's show is extra special because I broke with my own normal routine, because I felt that today's message is so important that you have to hear it. And so we brought together 5 different people from one organization to talk to you about some very important matters. So before I go ahead and introduce today's guest, I'm going to ask you to do what I always ask you to do, and that is to go out and be an evangelist for the Roundtable Talk Show, especially today, because I guarantee you will learn something from it. And your friends, your network, your neighbors will learn something as well. And we know friends don't let friends miss out on the Roundtable Talk Show. So today we are speaking with representatives from NORMI, the National Organization of Remediators and Mold Inspectors. We are starting with Mr. Doug Hoffman. NORMI is a not-for-profit certification organization for indoor air quality professionals. Doug has over 40 years of experience in the construction industry and holds 5 certifications from the state of Florida. Doug is the author of the book, Mold-Free Construction. For more information on NORMI, visit their website at normi.org. Good morning, Doug. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us.
You are so welcome. And like I said, this is not something I typically do, but with everything going on in the world, I thought it was important that we speak to you and your organization today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and your organization?
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, this topic is incredibly important. I actually learned in the 90s as a contractor that many of the problems that we had with indoor air quality really kind of centered around the way we built our homes or the way we actually lived in our environments. I remember back in the 80s where we started building buildings that didn't have windows that opened, commercial buildings that were just glass towers. And so we were living kind of in toxic soups indoors. And so one of the things that I did was when I wrote the book, Mold-Free Construction, the purpose was to help people understand the indoor air quality problems, what those problems were, and how to resolve them. So in 2004, Louisiana put in place a licensing law for mold professionals. That was the first state that actually had a licensing law for mold professionals. And we were asked to become a trainer, and that's where we started NORMI as the National Organization of Remediators and Mold Inspectors, for the purpose of not only doing training, but supporting those professionals so they could be successful and stay on top of this incredibly dynamic industry. And so now we're a training provider for 5 different states that have licensing laws on mold.
So Doug, let me ask you, with everything going on in the world, I think sometimes we are concerned about, COVID and our health and our immune system. And what we don't take into account is that it's not necessarily just COVID to be concerned about. It's, we have other concerns. Can you address that a little bit, Doug?
Sure. Yeah. I think what's interesting when you start talking about mold, and when we started our training, we wanted our professionals to understand that mold is really just an indoor air quality problem. It's under that umbrella. Obviously, when it's in a spore form, it's just floating around. It's a particulate. When it lands somewhere and it starts growing, it's a biological. When it actually starts off gassing, and now you've got odors that you're dealing with. So it really represents a lot of the different types of indoor air quality problems that we deal with all the time. And many of our allergies actually come from our reaction to pollen, or our reaction to roach parts, or cat dander, or whatever that is. A lot of that's indoor air quality issues. So we made sure when we first started training that we would talk about mold in the context of all of the types of indoor air quality issues that are out there. And so obviously it was easy for us to then say, hey, let's talk about viruses.
Yes, but over the last, what is it, 10 months now, you have more people who have been quarantining in their homes than ever before. I think in the past, people would at least have the luxury of having this commute and then their 8 to 10 hour workday when they're not in the home. And so they have opportunities to breathe. Whereas now people are on top of each other. We're in the house with pets and all these different things. What are some things that people should keep in mind?
Well, I think this is interesting when you say that, because in our indoor environments, in our homes and so forth, typically we leave them closed up a lot. I live in the South, I live in Louisiana, and our houses are air conditioned, and very few days of the year are you opening the windows and letting fresh air in. And so we're living in an environment where we're just kind of turning over those contaminants over and over and over again. And so, especially in those situations, like you said, now instead of spending an hour on the road to work, 8 hours at work, and an hour home, I'm spending those 10 hours in the same environment. And so I've got to be conscious of what those issues are and how I can actually deal with them, either by removing them or cleaning them, making sure that I've really got a clean, healthy environment, cleaner, safer, healthier environment indoors.
Yes. Now, Doug, I am going to come back to you, but we have quite a few guests today. I want to go ahead and introduce our next guest, Mr. Alvaro Zuluaga. Mo is a senior bilingual trainer with NORMI, a NORMI course developer and president of an indoor air assessment and remediation company. He has experience working in the commercial sector, especially in the hospitality industry. He is skilled in solution-based assessments, indoor air quality consulting, building maintenance consulting, technical sales and training, communication, and business development. Strong solution-oriented professional with engineering and business background. Good morning, Mo. How are you? Mo, are you with me? Mo, you're going to join us?
Yeah, I'm with you. I am with you. Sorry, I had muted just to make sure no noise interrupted the beginning of the conversation. Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. How about yourself?
I am excited. I'm always excited to learn. I tell people I do these shows for selfish reasons. And I was one of those people that I had allergies, or, when I was living in a certain house. And then all of a sudden, when I moved out of the house, the allergies magically cleared up. So I wanted to talk to you guys and get more understanding if maybe it was my imagination or not.
Well, a lot of people do believe that they're in their house, they start feeling symptoms, and some of the other people are not feeling those symptoms, and so they start thinking, "This is my imagination." And one of the bad habits that we have in society is that we tend to grab the people who complain quite a bit about, I'm having allergies, I'm having these issues, and we kind of ostracize them, kind of push them off to the side instead of paying attention to them. And we call those people in our industry the canaries in the coal mine. So as you know, in the past, we didn't have the fancy meters that we have nowadays. And what they used to do is they used to grab a canary and take it into the coal mine, and they'd actually have somebody whose job was to pay attention to the canary. And if the canary, passed out or died, it was the alarm system for everybody else. So one of the things that we need to learn is to pay attention to people like you who are suffering or are the first people to suffer, because you guys are sounding the alarm. And going back to the question that that you had for Doug about people being in their homes on a constant basis, one of the things that people need to start realizing about being home the whole time is that you have an HVAC system that obviously Steve Hergot here will be talking a little bit about, but that HVAC system is what we call the hearts and lungs of the home, and it's where we really need to pay a lot of our attention to. So absolutely, it's not in your imagination.
Thank you. Thank you. But let's talk a little bit about the heart of the home. What should people keep in mind?
Well, for the home, if you really think about it, when you look at the structure of the home, when you look at the entirety of the home, it's a system. It's really almost like a living organism, and the key point is to maintain it healthy. So there's a couple of different approaches that we take towards doing that. Number one is obviously maintenance. So we want to make sure that we do scheduled maintenance on our HVAC system. It gets cleaned out properly. We use proper filtration, which we talk quite a bit in our classes, what kind of filtration you'd be using, what kind of filtration you shouldn't be using. And we do go extensively into air purification. So we do talk about equipment that as the system works, as the HVAC system works, it not only purifies the air, but it purifies the surfaces in the home, and it helps maintain a healthy home.
I like that, Mo. I am going to come back to you, but I want to go ahead and introduce our next guest, Mr. Lewis Adams. Lewis is also a NORMI trainer, course developer, and product designer. He has been in the cleaning and restoration industry since 1983 as a Master Water Restorer, Master Smoke and Fire Restorer, and Master Textile Cleaner. Over the last 10 years, he has run his own restoration company and restoration consulting firm. Good morning, Lewis. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
You're excited to be here today?
I am.
I get used to a certain reception when people come on the show. I like people to get up, get excited. We're saving the world, Lewis.
And we are. You're the right group of people to save the world.
Yes. Why are you so passionate about this issue, about NORMI?
I became involved with NORMI a few years ago. I met Doug at a conference, and it seemed like our paths had followed a similar pathway over the years. And I was very passionate about indoor air quality. That came from my experience in restoration, because I would always take a contaminated facility and I would change it into a clean sanitary facility again. And then I started saying, well, that's all reactive. What can we do on a proactive basis? What can we do to prevent these conditions from happening? And that's when I became involved with Doug and NORMI.
Okay, so what were you seeing as reactive? What were some of the issues that you were seeing, though?
Well, what I'm seeing is that all we do is we expect our cleaning after we have a major problem, and then we go in and we do these things. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to do things on a proactive basis. We need to have a planned maintenance program. We need to make sure that we are looking at the things like the indoor air quality through purification, through making sure that we can use coatings on surfaces to maintain healthy surfaces so that we don't have any type of cross-contamination. So we can do things differently. We just have to think differently a little bit than we have in the past. Instead of just being reactive, we want to be proactive.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about the surfaces, are we talking about residential, commercial?
We're talking about all those.
Yes.
We're talking about all your touch points. You're talking about your furniture. You're talking about anything that people are going to come in contact with when they're inside of a facility.
Mm-hmm.
Home or commercial.
What do business owners and management teams need to know before hiring a company to sanitize their indoor work environment?
Oh, that's a good question. So there's a lot of people out there who are, sanitizing facilities. The one thing that the people need to know about is, how are they going to show that they are sanitizing it? How do they prove that they have a reduction of load? Are they doing pre and post sampling? Are they giving them a report at the end of the term? What kind of solutions are they using? Are they using things that are approved for those types of surfaces, or even in the air or the HVAC system? So they need to know if the professionals are really professionals, or if they're just out there, fogging some stuff in the air. So there's some good questions they can ask.
Okay, so we're gonna make a list of all the good questions that we get asked. I'm going to come back to you, Lewis. I want to go ahead and introduce our next guest, Mr. Steve Hergott. Steve is a NORMI course developer and the author of Healthy Harmless Home, which focuses on HVAC solutions to indoor air quality problems. He has been an HVAC sales engineer for 40 plus years in the Northeast and is a certified IAQ mode assessor. He owns an indoor air quality company. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Hey, good morning. I'm up here in cold New Hampshire. Glad to be with you guys.
I'm glad to have you here. You're a specialist as well.
I am, yeah. I've been in, like you just mentioned, I've been in the HVAC field my whole life. So this is my 41st year.
Oh, wow.
Sounds like I'm getting old, huh?
No, you're still young. You're still young. Why are you so passionate about HVAC, Steve? 40 years, why?
Yeah, well, because, I've always been taking care of our customers. So I've been an owner twice of my own HVAC companies. And, and you really end up feeling for your customers when they call in with problems, and you want to help them. So early on in my career, some of my customers would call with indoor air quality concerns, and I got frustrated as an HVAC contractor that I had limited answers for them.
Mm-hmm. And so what's part of your frustration writing the book?
Yeah, the book came, I have a story about that. If we have time, I'll tell you later on. But the book addresses homeowner complaints and what they should do about it. So really my theme of my book is, if you're a homeowner, right, and you have an indoor air quality problem and your kids are sick or your pets are sick, who are you going to call? And I believe you're going to call your HVAC contractor first and ask them.
Well, Steve, now I'm gonna ask you, and what I do on the Roundtable Talk Show is I ask the hard questions. That's what I do. But what I tend to see is that when our pets are sick or our children are sick or we start to feel well, we may not necessarily think of the indoor air quality. We may not think of the air quality at all. We may just feel like, oh, it's the flu. And right about now, everyone thinks everything is COVID.
Yeah, well, I would argue, I think a lot of homeowners now are thinking indoor air quality problems because they're hearing it right on the news all the time. They're reading about it, and they're on Facebook, and they're just learning more and more about that. It could be an indoor air quality problem causing their problems.
It could be. It definitely could be. That's why I like to have these discussions. But okay, so let me ask you this then, Steve. What are the most common homeowner complaints that you address?
Well, just thinking back to the last month or so, I mean, the complaints I've been getting from folks, number one, I'd say, is strange odors. You know, odors in the house. Where are they coming from? Are they serious? Are they dangerous? So I get a lot of odor calls. And then the other common one is people wake up in the morning and they're congested. And they're wondering why are they congested? Is this something new? It used to be they went on vacation and they came back to their house. They felt great on vacation. They come back to their house and they feel awful. And they would start to conclude, wow, it must be something about the house I'm living in causing my problems.
Yes, or maybe the fact that I finished my vacation and I have to come back to my life and I don't want to.
Yeah, there's an emotional psychology. Yep.
I don't know, Steve, but I'm going to come back to you. I want to go ahead and introduce our next guest, the lovely Miss Leanne Billings. Leanne is the co-author of Mold, the War Within, Lessons Learned from Katrina, a book on structural mold and the health effects of mold and chemical exposures. She has been an advocate for mold victims since 2005 with a passion for educating people on the health risks of mold exposure in home and work environments, as well as in disaster areas. Good morning, Leanne. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having us on, Sharifa.
You are so welcome. You're here. You're at the party. Now we can get the conversation going. Why are you so passionate about NORMI, Leanne?
Well, I first became aware of NORMI after my book was published. I had a doctor call me, Dr. Doris Rapp. She's a very famous pediatrician. She's now since retired, but she was one of the first environmental doctors that really was out there making a difference. And Doris called me and she said, I love your book. I want to write the foreword. So when it was first published, it didn't have a foreword. And so that's how she came to write the foreword of the book. And the book is sold in over 59 countries. And it really opened my eyes to seeing how big of a problem indoor air quality is. Because when I first wrote my book, I wrote it after my family got ill and recovered from mold exposure after Hurricane Katrina. And I thought, well, this will just be a little niche book, you know, down on the Gulf Coast. But really, there's a lot of people that become ill from indoor air quality issues, and it's a big problem. And now the whole world is focused on it, which is a good thing in many ways. But one of the things that Doris said, one of the very first things she said is, I've got to introduce you to NORMI. And I'm like, okay, great. Who's NORMI? Some guy, some fella. And she says, NORMI. And I'm like, right, I know, but what was NORMI's last name? So then she said, well, Doug Hoffman. I said, what, NORMI Doug Hoffman? Anyway, so it was kind of funny, my first impression of NORMI. But the more I got to talking to Doug and learning about what NORMI did, I found that there was such an important opportunity for us to band together and do some outreach into disaster areas to let people know that if they're in a high-risk group, they need to be aware that they're in a high-risk group, because avoidance of mold exposure, be it in a disaster area or even in a home or workplace, avoidance and prevention of high levels of concentrated exposures to the mold and mycotoxins, which are poisons that emit from the molds, that's the first important step, because once you get ill from mold exposure, it is not easy to recover. It's not like having a bacterial infection where you get an antibiotic prescribed and 10 days later you're feeling great. Mold exposure is so different and affects people so differently. And so that's one of my passions, is letting people know if you're in a high risk group, you need to be aware of it and take steps to protect yourself, either in your home or work environment, and especially in a disaster area.
Now, Leanne, you mentioned several times high risk group, high risk group. Would you please define what the high risk group is?
There's a lot of people, different subgroups on populations that are considered high risk group by the CDC. And a lot of it is common sense. People who, have very poor health, they're already aware. People who have conditions that we may consider normal, like allergies, asthma, things like that, that puts you in a high risk group. Any sort of respiratory condition can put people at a high risk group category when it comes to mold exposure. And one of the most hidden groups is people who use steroids for allergy management, because they use the steroids for allergy management, but when they get in a mold environment, the steroids have lowered their immune system. And so those people, the CDC has on the same high risk group as someone who's had an organ transplant. And that is almost mind-boggling, but that is how that works. Other high risk groups are children under 12, elderly people, people who've had recent surgeries. That was one of the reasons that I became ill after Hurricane Katrina, because I'd had a recent surgery. We also had children, and my husband was on steroids for allergy management. And we had no idea that mold could make us ill. And had we known that ahead of time in a disaster area, we would have taken different steps. We just didn't know. And that's how most people end up getting ill, is because they just don't know they're in a high risk group. And that's generally when they call me because they've read my book. And the other thing that people become ill from because of mold exposure is that they haven't hired someone who's trained and certified and qualified to remediate their house.
We're going to talk about that, but I want to go back to you when you talked about after Hurricane Katrina and you got sick. Was your first inclination, oh my God, it's the mold from the water? Or did you have to go back and forth to the doctor or try different things, try different medications before you actually came to the realization that it was from the mold?
We actually were evacuated up to Montana from Louisiana, and we just went into regular doctors, and they said, well, you're sick. They tried different things. They couldn't get us well. We got worse, and they kept saying, you had to have gotten into something down there in that disaster area. What did you get into? And we're like, well, we don't know. There was just mold everywhere. And they're like, well, mold can't make you sick. And we're like, okay, well, so we were trying to figure out what else could it be. And we ended up being placed in an apartment building that actually ended up being a sick building in and of itself. We hired a mold remediator to come over and do some assessment. He also did like other VOC testing and things. So we had him come over to our apartment to do some testing. And he said, what's wrong with you guys? And we said, we're sick from having gone through Hurricane Katrina. And he said, well, what does your doctor say? And I said, well, that we had to have gotten exposed to something. And we told him, there was mold everywhere, but the doctors say that mold can't make you sick. And he said, let me tell you, mold can definitely make you sick. So he gave us a few links, and we were just kind of surprised that doctors really had zero awareness of how mold could make someone ill. We had to go through multiple doctors. We finally ended up working with an MD and an ND, and they progressed to prescribe things, making us worse. So my degree's in journalism, so I got on the phone, interviewed all the published peer-reviewed people at that time, MDs, PhDs, that were all over the country. There was just a handful, and taped my interviews, and they said, yep, mold can make you sick. This is why. And we took the information in to our doctors from them. A lot of them gave us suggestions for treatment components. And thankfully, our ND and our MD were both very open to working with that information. And we went through months of trial and error, trying to find out what would work for us. And then we recovered. Took about 9 months to recover before we could actually start working again. But I will say that people, everybody's different. They have different genetics. They have different health histories, weight, gender, age, all those things can affect what treatment component will work and what won't work. So what I always tell people is gather information from, books and other people who've recovered, but take the information into your doctors, work with your doctor, let your doctor make the decision of what you should and shouldn't try and what might be the best solution. And it's generally a combination of things that enable people to recover. And one of the top things is to remove themselves from the source of exposure.
Absolutely. Doug, what were your thoughts on what Leanne had to say in her experience in being told that mold does not make you sick?
Yeah, I think that's so sad, but it happens all the time. It seems like when we do assessments in someone's home, it's typically the wife who is noticing something that's going on in the house. And I always say it's because we men are not too sensitive sometimes. And yet she's sensing what's going on. And oftentimes, I'm serious, I've actually had women tell me that they were told by their doctor that they needed to see a psychiatrist. And I think what's really that, as Mo said, when you don't listen to what's actually going on in that with that person in that environment, it happens all the time. But as an assessor, as an indoor air quality assessor, that's one of the most important pieces of information we can get. Where is it happening? How is it happening? What are you feeling when you come in here? And I know all of that's totally subjective, but as part of the assessment process, we've got to know how that person feels about what's going on in that environment. And then, of course, we followed up with objective testing, really good diagnostics to show that, hey, yeah, there is a problem, and then to identify what that problem is. Because if you don't know what the problem is, you don't have a solution.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lewis, has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, the interview process is so critical. And I've worked with lots of people who have chemical sensitivities and so forth, and they've been told by lots of people that they're just crazy. And come to find out once you do the testing that they're not crazy. It is their home that's causing those problems. So.
Yes, they also may not feel that they're crazy, but if they have multiple people in the home and they're the only one feeling the symptoms, they may still feel like it's something to do with me as opposed to something to do with the house, because if it was the house, then everyone would be affected.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mo, has that been your experience where you met with people and they say something's happening here and nobody believes them? I know we talked about my house earlier.
Right. Oh, absolutely. We get that all the time. I think one of the interesting things that has come out of this whole COVID thing is that people are getting a little bit more knowledge about this world and the things that they need to understand and know. For example, I would say this is the first time in, as far as I can remember, that I walk into some homes and people know that IAQ stands for indoor air quality. So it's that's a huge step. They're starting to understand, and that is not just mold. Although we talk a lot about mold because mold is a wonderful surrogate, and we can talk about what surrogate means here in a minute. It's a wonderful surrogate to be able to see all the other issues that happen in a house. But there's a lot of different things that can happen in the house. You can have gases or VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Those can affect you. And a lot of the times when we go into an environment, we find that it can be, or it might not be mold. It might be something else that's making it thick. So paying attention and listening is key, because if you don't understand the need, you can't fill it. So
Yeah.
you need to know what you need to really listen and know what you're facing.
So what is a surrogate?
So surrogate means stands in the place of.
Okay.
Right? So when, for example, if we had a water bottle, like I have a water bottle right here, and we were to test this water bottle to see what kind of contaminants inside of it, well, as you know, there's literally thousands of different types of bacteria that could be in this water bottle. Well, they don't test for each single one. They'll test for individual bacteria, and for each bacteria, it represents an entire list of other bacteria or contaminants that is a surrogate for. So it stands in the place of. So we use mold as a great surrogate because out of the contaminants that we have in the environment, mold really encompasses all the different types of contaminants. It can be an odor, it can be a gas, it can produce gas, it's a floating particle. So it's visual. One of the wonderful things about mold is sometimes because of the way it grows, it's a lot easier to spot than, for example, if we see bacteria is growing. Bacteria is a lot harder to spot. So we use mold as a pretty good surrogate to be able to attack indoor air quality problems in the home, but it's definitely not the only thing that we test for.
Sharifa, could I offer just a suggestion? Some folks are not aware of this, but I think this is really helpful for people like you who are dealing with these issues and don't know where to turn. A lot of people don't realize that the American Medical Association, of course, which is the major organization that most doctors are obviously a part of, there's a subset of those doctors called the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, AAEM. And we get a lot of calls from those doctors because those are environmental doctors. And so you go to one of those kind of doctors and he's going to say, I keep giving you Claritin, but then I'm sending you back to this house that's contaminated. Maybe you better take care of looking at the house. And so AAEM is a really important acronym to remember. That subset of doctors, you're looking for somebody who's going to help you start thinking in terms of environmental factors instead of just what's going on with your body. That's a great resource, I think.
I think that's an excellent point. But I just want to ask you, Doug, do you feel, and this is just a feeling, an opinion based on your experience, that too often people just take the Claritin, or they say, you know what, Doug has allergies all of his life, give him some Claritin and he'll be fine. And sometimes we don't take a look at the root of what the actual issue is.
Yes, amen, amen. So I'm a child of the 60s, and as a child of the 60s, we thought drugs fixed everything. And unfortunately, I think what happens is I told somebody the other day, because I'm now in my 70s, that's why I'm seeing so many CVS's and Walgreens go up everywhere, because we think that drugs are the answer to our problem. And really, they're just dealing with symptoms, right? What we need to do is we need to find out the root of the problem. And that can't always be fixed by a pill. So if you are having a reaction to an indoor environment and you can clean up that indoor environment by removing those contaminants or cleaning up that environment, is it going to have a positive impact on your health? Yes. We tell people in our training, we're not doctors and we don't fix people, we fix buildings. And if we can create a clean environment, indoor air quality is a multifaceted problem. So it needs a multi-strategic solution. And if we can go in there and fix it, likelihood that may be at least a source of the problems that you're facing in that environment.
Absolutely. Steve, what are some of the courses that you recommend?
For HVAC contractors, you mean, or in general for
contractors?
Contractors, yeah. So my experience, again, as the contractor and being in HVAC my whole life, is that they're very good at, I'll say, particle control. HVAC guys are great at air filters, air filtration. And then they think they're in the indoor air quality solutions business because they're really good at changing air filters. But as Doug just said, there's so much more to it. So the classes I'm developing with NORMI are going to be devoted towards educating HVAC contractors that there's a lot more opportunity out there for them to, I'll say, make additional profits, but mainly solve their customers' problems by offering those multi-strategic solutions to indoor air quality problems.
Okay, so give us an example. Aside from just going in, changing the air filter, what else should a contractor look for?
Yeah, so I call my acronym for the solutions. I call them MVPs, MVPs, MVPs. So M is moisture control.
Mhm.
So up here in New England, we have to add moisture in the winter because it's too dry indoors. We have to add moisture. And in the summer, of course, we're taking moisture out in most times. That's what a good properly sized air conditioning system does. So if we can control moisture, we can control mold growth. The V stands for ventilation, outdoor air, makeup air, dilution air. If you got a indoor pollutant, one great way to control it is to dilute it with some outdoor air. That's what we get when we open windows. We mentioned that earlier. In certain climates, you in the spring and fall, your windows are open because you can, and that's very healthy. The P stands for the particle control. Again, what the HVAC guys are good at. So those are the MERV ratings of air filters, HEPA air cleaners. Most people have heard about particle control. And then the S is, I'll call that's almost like the secret weapon of NORMI and Best Living System, sanitization protocols, air and surface purification. Deal with the bad guys in the air and on the surface. And so that's my MVPs.
I like your MVPs. And what's so interesting in listening to you guys talk, I'm hearing you, but I'm just sitting here missing my grandmother. And that's like the weirdest response that I thought I would have had to this show, because it's like my grandmother would come in and be like, open these windows, dust off these shelves, put this stuff away. And maybe that's what we need, some grandmas out there shaking up the world and telling people to clean up this mess. Louis, I know part of your focus is on sanitization as well.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is that I think that your grandmother's right. Clean off that shelf, dust that off. And the other thing is that we are using too many disinfectants. I'm gonna throw that little thing on there. We need to just clean stuff. Okay, good old fashioned soap and water, clean it up. Stop using disinfectants in the place of a cleaner, because disinfectants are just like antibiotics. If they're overused, you're going to get a buildup of bacteria or bacteria-resistant, strains, and that's bad. And that's why, like in some of the places like hospitals, where we have, these antibiotic-resistant strains of staph and other things like that. Well, the same thing is going to start happening in our homes if we aren't careful. If we just keep using disinfectants in the place of cleaners, we're going to also have those problems in our homes. So let's keep it clean, but let's keep it clean in the correct way. Cleaning is just as good as sanitization by just physically removing the contaminant. Don't try to kill the problem, just remove it.
Absolutely.
Yes. Who said absolutely? Mo?
That was me.
That was Mo. Mo, so I'm
Right.
gonna ask you my next question then. So, but the key word, the buzzword, every other word is disinfected now. Disinfectant. You gotta have a disinfectant. Have you disinfected that? I see so many commercials. Even when you go to the restaurant, there's signs that say, come in, we have disinfected. I'm like, but haven't you always disinfected?
Well, it's interesting. This is actually a really strong topic to talk about, because one of the key things that Louis pointed out is that when we're talking about disinfecting, cleaning, everything, we're talking about chemistry. And the chemistry for disinfecting and chemistry for cleaning is very, very different. And believe it or not, cleaning, that's why, we're constantly told, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. Cleaners have something called surfactants in them. And the surfactants actually will break the cell wall of bacteria, viruses, everything like that, and it will destroy it. So in essence, it's doing a better job of basically protecting us than any disinfectant ever really would. And one of the things that a lot of people really didn't understand is, for a disinfectant to really, really work, you have to clean first. So
Okay.
if you look at any disinfectant, every disinfectant on the planet or in the United States has something that's called an EPA label. Okay, and the EPA label tells you how to use it, how to apply it, how long it has to stay on there, and the whole entire process. And one of the key things that every single one of those chemicals will tell you is that you have to clean first. Because if you're not cleaning first, and the disinfectant might just be hitting that top layer of dirt or whatever you have on there, and never really getting to what you're trying to kill.
Just smearing it around.
You're smearing it around. That's right. And you might be inactivating a lot of that disinfectant or sanitizer, which by the way, a lot of people really confuse those terms: sanitizing, disinfecting, sterilizing. Those are all things that mean completely different things. But I think the key concept of, and going back to what Lewis said, is that we need to understand that the most powerful tool that we have to protect our homes is cleaning. Cleaning, maintaining the home clean, and apart from obviously maintaining the HVAC healthy. Those are, to me, those are my two main goals.
Which is really funny, Sharifa, because you remember, I remember, I'm old enough to remember that we cleaned our house every spring, every fall. And it wasn't it wasn't just wiping things down. It was taking the rugs out and taking the blinds down and, vacuuming the couch. All of that was cleaning. And I've said this so many times, I wonder how many people actually do that today. Where they do a really clean, thorough cleaning on a regular basis. Would make a huge difference in indoor air quality environments.
That's right. So we should touch up the paint as well, right? Yeah. So we should touch up the paint. The whole purpose of the paint was never to make it look pretty. It was to control moisture from entering the structure. So it's a different world.
I think that's a good book. So whoever on the team who wants to write another book, I think this needs to be Mold for Laymen. You know what I mean? And it's just going to have all the things in the book that your grandmother told you to do. Because like Doug was saying, I do remember that. And I always tell people my funny story is my mom has 8 brothers and sisters. And so she never, with a lot of kids, you never have everything that you wanted. So when she became an adult, she just buys stuff. Okay, she has a lot of stuff. So my job as a kid was always to dust off mom's stuff every Saturday. You know what I mean? So now as an adult, I'm anti-stuff. We will have no stuff ever. People come into my house, they're like, Sharifa, you're a minimalist. I'm like, no, I just don't like dusting, But someone really, who wants to take on that book? I think I'm gonna leave it till the end.
It's in here. It's in my
there?
book. Yeah, I got a couple of pages talking about what Doug just mentioned, how to do a spring cleaning. It's in my book.
It's actually in my book. It's actually in my book too. Chapter 13. Yeah.
I stole it from Doug and put it in my book.
So we got spring cleaning in there. I think spring cleaning is important. What do you think, Leanne?
So important.
I think that keeping your home environment clean is important. I think being a minimalist is good. I completely understand what you're saying about not wanting to dust. What a lot of people don't understand about dust is that if there's a problem, wet indoor environments have not just the potential to have mold, but they also can, in that same environment, is bacteria and viruses. And each one of those microorganisms, what they do is they produce their own toxins. Mold produce mycotoxins. Bacteria produce their own toxins. Those toxins, what they do is they travel through the air on particles. They can be dust particles. They can be fragments of mold spores, fragments of bacterial cell walls. And so when you're cleaning, the dust is not just dust, it's toxins that get into that dust. So the other thing that's important for people to really understand, and this is why it's so important to hire someone to come in and assess who's trained and certified and licensed if your state requires it, is because there's been a popular trend, quick fix. Oh, you have this problem here, all you need to do is spray chemicals on the mold. And believe it or not, there's companies out there that don't even remove the mold, don't address the cause of the moisture that caused the mold in the first place. And then when they spray chemicals to make the mold go away, they have introduced toxic chemicals into the environment, which then causes the homeowners and the occupants to become chemically sensitive. And it just makes a much harder health situation to overcome, because once you're sensitized to chemicals, it's hard to get back to where you were, especially when your house has been sprayed with all sorts of chemicals. So where Mo talks about chemistries, you really have to know what someone's going to introduce into your home, and you have to really make sure that they know their stuff, because people that aren't properly trained, they are basically saying this is going to instantly fix your problem, and people often believe them,
Absolutely.
which is
No.
really sad.
I think that's sad as well, but I always tell people I'm the kind of person that I love to be told what I need to do. My mechanic tells me, he says, Sharifa, you take really good care of your car. And I say, no, you take really good care of my car. You tell me what day I need to bring it in, what I need to do, and I do what you tell me. So in this, I will be looking for someone to come into my home and say, Sharifa, you know what, maybe you need more filtration, or maybe your air is too much, or maybe there's mold here. I will look for more of an assessment. Is that something that NORMI does?
Absolutely. And I think that's a great way to think about it. Our tagline has always been, it's not just about getting a license or getting trained, it's about building a successful business. And the point is that we want our members to know how to look at the environment, as Mo said, as a living, breathing organism, how to do the right kind of testing. And there's a whole range of testing that can be done, how to ask the right kinds of questions. All of that is about learning how to run a successful business. And what I mean by successful is I don't mean financially successful. I mean by giving solution-based remediation, solution-based sanitization to give people exactly what they need to have a cleaner, healthier, and safer environment. And so it is a lot about training and making sure that those guys really understand what they're doing. I was thinking about the monitoring program that we're putting in place this year, specifically for COVID. There's product testing out there now that can test your air for COVID, SARS-CoV-2. And that's going to become a very important part of what we do this year in our sanitization professional training, because we want guys to have all the tools and all the technology that's out there to make sure they can to at least some degree guarantee that they've done their job correctly.
So if there are contractors out there who want to get trained in this specific area, can they contact NORMI?
Absolutely. We have a couple of websites, of course, and the training that we're really focusing on this year is called a Certified Sanitizing Professional. And it's a broad range training, which talks about viruses and how they work. You know, you can't kill a virus, you can deactivate it. So we talk about viruses, we talk about chemistries, as Mo said, we talk about solutions and assessing the entire package. And that's called our Certified Sanitizing Professional. And that's available, of course, through our websites, both online, and we're going to be doing some on-site classes as well.
Have you seen an increase in the demand for people to come in and certify or clean the homes?
Yes, in fact, it's interesting. Right now, it's kind of funny how things have gone. We actually introduced this class in April of last year. We had 214 online, I think the first class we taught. And what was interesting is that there wasn't as much a demand then as there is now. Now that businesses in most states are opening up, one of the biggest questions that we're being asked is, what can I do to guarantee to my customers that I've done all I can do to create a healthier environment? What can I do? And so I think businesses are becoming more aware. We just did a great job on a huge school system up in Missouri, 15 schools, to make sure that they could go back to school. So the timing is right. People are beginning to look for professionals to deal with this issue.
When I've been speaking to the different guests, the one area that I've seen is not only the customers in the schools, but the employees. I've spoken to so many guests on the show when we're discussing COVID and going back to work and returning to what may be the new normal. There are many employees who are like, you know what? I don't know if that office is safe. I don't know if it's clean. I don't know if I can go back into it.
Sharifa, I got a call last month from a major hospital. If I told you who it was, you'd say, oh yeah, I know who they are. They had two surgeons who refused to go into the surgical center until they were sure that it was cleaned properly. So you're exactly right. I think it's the demand is there. It's just we need more professionals out there in the marketplace to know how to do it right and not just make outrageous claims about what they're doing, giving people a false sense of security.
Now, I know it takes training, it takes education, and it takes time to receive all these certifications. But what I always look at is, like, for instance, if you call any government agency, they don't even have enough people to handle all the phone calls. You know, there must be such a demand, and we have so many people who are unemployed, so many people who need careers. I think this is something that they should look into, getting trained on this.
It absolutely is. In fact, I think it's interesting because from a licensing standpoint, the states haven't really licensed indoor air quality professionals. They've left it up to trade associations like us to certify those guys. But the truth is, and Leanne and I were working on this program right before COVID hit, putting together training programs for veterans, guys that come out of the military and they need a job. You know, what better job than to actually create a career for yourself where you're helping other people? If you've got an entrepreneurial spirit, man, you're our kind of people. You know, I always tell people, Sharifa, that I was self-unemployed for 40 years in the construction industry, you know, and I know what it is to work for yourself, and we know what it takes. And those are the kind of people that you're exactly right. Now's a great time to start a business.
That's beautiful. And I love the way you said that, because I always talk about my father. I love my father to death, to life. And he's had his own plumbing and HVAC business in California since 1985. And when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, I was kind of frustrated and stressed. And he said to me, he said, Sharifa, you have to stop looking at yourself as unemployed and start looking at yourself as self-employed. And when I did that and I made that transition, it changed. I know you understand what I'm saying, that it has a total change in the mindset. I have definitely enjoyed this show. Now, we are coming down to the last few minutes of the show. And what I love to do at the end of every show is just simply allow my guests the opportunity to speak directly to the audience, to everyone who is watching this show live, as well as everyone who is watching in the archives, and let them know what you want them to take away from your appearance here today. And we're going to start with you, Mo.
Well, thank you, Sharifa. I think one of the key questions that you asked at the beginning from a couple of guests were, you know, why are you passionate about NORMI? And I'm going to tell you why I'm passionate. And I'm going to make this really quick. My background is I started in the military. You know, I was in the military for a number of years. I became an engineer and then went to a GE. So my professional career started in a very structured, a lot of training, ethics was incredibly important. So to me, it's always been the foundation. I've always thought that a true foundation for a successful career revolves around education, training, and ethics. And when I met NORMI through Doug, that's what I found. And that's why I became immediately attached to NORMI, because I said, this is a place in this industry that I can find this. So what I would tell their guests, our guests, is when you do have the need, reach out to us. We're here to help. We want to help you, and we want to help you by giving you the correct answer, wherever that may lead. So, and that's why I love hanging around the group of people that you have here, is because everybody here is focused around helping, around service, and around doing the right thing.
Beautiful. Thank you. Steve, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I think my takeaway or my advice for homeowners is just don't put up with being sick in your home. Call for help. You know, go on the internet, do some research, call your HVAC guy, ask them questions. But just don't put up with it, because there are solutions.
There are solutions. Yes. Lewis, what do you have for us?
Well, I think it comes down to everyone has control of their own environment, and that they can keep it clean, and that they have a place they can go when they need to have professional advice. Someone like NORMI, a NORMI certified assessor or remediator, a sanitization professional, whatever. But they're the ones that are in charge, and they need to be able to ask the right questions and feel comfortable and confident with the people who they are interviewing to do work in their home. So they need to know the right information, and that they know that they can be in control.
I like that. Thank you, Miss Leanne.
I think it's always good for people to interview 3 people. If they're looking for an assessor or a remediator, talk to more than one person, because that will help you really identify who does know what they're talking about. For people who are looking for a mold assessor or remediator that you want to make sure is trained, certified, and licensed according to their state laws, you can look at normipro.com, because any professionals listed on that website have been trained and screened by NORMI. They're trained, they're certified, and if their state requires a license, they are licensed. If there's anyone who's interested in looking at courses that NORMI puts out and working to develop and start their own indoor air quality business, the website to go for that is events.normi.org. Feel free to reach out. We have an 800 number. We also have support at normi.org. Lots of people that we can put you in touch with. We have mentors, membership mentors that can talk one-on-one with people to explore that opportunity.
Oh, that's wonderful, Doug. I have truly enjoyed this show and I've learned so much. And you know, one of the things I've learned, Grandma was right. What's your takeaway, Doug?
Well, thank you. I just want to tell your clients that one of the things that I've learned about the internet, and one of the great things about the internet, is there's all kinds of information on the internet. One of the bad things about the internet is there's all kinds of information on the internet. And I want your listeners to know that we want to be a resource for you. We take, as Mo said, ethics is very important to us. We take our job seriously. We want to give you good, accurate information. We want to help you create a cleaner, healthier, safer environment in your home. And if you have an interest in helping others do that, as an entrepreneur or creating a business, starting a business, we want to help you with that as well. But let us be a resource. It's not about the money to us. It's about the truth. And it's about us sharing with you information that we know is accurate. So thank you so much for this opportunity, Sharifa. This has been phenomenal. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome. I want to thank you all for being guests on today's episode of the Roundtable Talk Show. And I especially want to thank everyone who tuned in to watch the show live, as well as everyone who is watching in the archives. We definitely appreciate your support. But as always, I ask that you not only watch the show, that you not only share the show, but that you support our guests. Visit the website, normi.org. Take a look at their information. Take a look at their opportunity. Take a look at some of their courses, or look at your home and see if there's some ways that you can make improvements, and contact NORMI to help you. Now, if you're interested in more ways that I can help your business, or maybe you want to be a guest on the Roundtable Talk Show, please visit my website at asksharifa.com. Until tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, everyone have a safe and a blessed day. Bye now.